I think it's recording now.
All right, good morning again, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here. My name is Arturo Jimenez, and I'm an immigration attorney from 22 years, immigration attorney, also an author, and I dabble with a little bit of music, and I was on the Denver Public School Board for 8 years, so I tend to be a political science or politics nerd as well. And I'm here today to talk about the situation of the children at the border and give you an update with regards to immigration law, particularly focused on kids. Um, Being part of the Latino community, seeing what's happening to the children at the border has, of course, broken my heart and many people's hearts throughout the country to see that through the last two administrations, the government has locked up little children, including infants and toddlers, who are here without their parents at the border. To make sure that there was awareness and consciousness about what was happening to the children at the border, I wrote a book last year. And my greatest fear last year was that no one would know about what was happening to the kids at the border. I had gone down to the border and visited the camps to see what was happening with my own eyes and volunteer as well. So in October of 2019, my book came out. It's called Dreamer's Nightmare. It's the US war on immigrant Latinx children. I'm proud to say that I did win a International Latino Book Award just this year. So I'm happy that the word is getting out there. I'm also really happy that it wasn't my book that kind of broke the story. People already know, everyday people know about children being caged at the border. Even at the NFL Super Bowl last year, J-Lo and Shakira did, their halftime show, and they featured little children in cages just to make sure that there was a statement. And so I was cheering, saying, wow, I can't believe this is so great that our community has come together and denounced this situation. But right now, in December of 2020, many of us are still in disbelief that the practice continues. And we're, like myself, many people are worried that even under a new presidential administration with Joe Biden, that things may continue and that it'll be very difficult for even Joe Biden, even if he wanted to disentangle our government from what's going on. So that's the purpose of this today. At the end, I'll sing you a little song. I'm not the best singer or musician, but it's a song that's about to be recorded with some good friends of mine, including some folks who are pretty well known. And anyway, we'll talk about the song later. So first, I'm going to go to a PowerPoint here. I'm going to share screen with you. All right, let me share this PowerPoint. And let me get to, sorry, it was in the middle. Okay, can everyone see this PowerPoint, Immigrant Children, Politics of New Dreamers at the Border?
Yeah. Okay.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so I already gave you an introduction. This is just a picture of some little kids here in Denver. Of course, the original title of my book was called The President's War on Immigrant Children because under President Obama, we saw the caging of children and families really start and become a policy of the United States, a quiet policy. And of course, under President Trump, we saw an exponential rise in the policy of caging children, and more insidious was that we saw the separation of families on top of caging of children. We saw them taking away parents, and we're still in a situation where many children who were separated from their parents at the border by our immigration officials have not been reunited with their families. So this isn't just going to bash Donald Trump. It's going to talk about how our government, under both Democratic and Republican governments, have both really failed us in terms of protecting the our most valued asset within the Latino community, which are children. Okay, so here's the cover of the book again, Dreamer's Nightmare. Um, the book is available on Amazon, but I'd like to say, number one, it's available for free, particularly if you have the uh, uh, Amazon Prime and you activate your Kindle Prime through that, then you can go ahead and download the electronic version of this book for free if you already have that service. Otherwise, you can order paper copies. But the purpose again was never to really sell books, but to make sure that the word gets out there. So it is available for free. Please let people know that they can go ahead and download it on their Kindle Prime membership for free. I would really appreciate that if you would pass the word. A little bit about me real quick. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask a quick question about the book. Sorry. If we purchase it through Amazon, does some of that money go back to you?
Yeah, very little, but it does come back. Most of it goes to Amazon. I think the black and white version of the cover and the art inside is $14.95, if I'm not mistaken, and the color version with all the colored art inside is like $34.95. And
Okay.
yes, I see very little of those proceeds from those books, but I do get a little bit every once in a while from Amazon. So.
And if we wanted to purchase directly from you so that you could get like all the money, is there a way to do that?
The truth is I have to purchase my copies off of Amazon, so it's not much difference. With the pandemic, I would really suggest that people order from Amazon, and that way it comes straight to your house and you avoid all the issues, and you could, if there's something wrong with it, you could return it if it's torn, or get a new copy. So yeah, I mean, I wish if I had the ability to order 10,000 copies from China, for $1 each, get them sent back and then sell them on my own would be wonderful. But more importantly is getting the word out about what's happening and making sure that people have access. So I've even found, I teach a class at Metro, Chicanos in the Law, and there were a couple students who just were having a really hard time when the pandemic hit, lost their homes, lost their job. And so I just sent out a couple copies that I have a couple copies, and I sent them out to them. We dropped one off at someone's house for them, just to make sure that they had them. So yeah, I really appreciate that. Hopefully my next book, I'll try to do my homework better so that I actually can see some of the proceeds and not just keep enriching Amazon every time. But I
Yeah,
have
thank
to
you.
say, Amazon is wonderful for self-publishing because it does go out to the world, and then anyone internationally can order the book. And I have had folks in other countries order the book, and it's just really convenient and great for authors who aren't part of a large publishing house as well. But let's get back to my presentation. Do you have any more questions? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, thank you so much for sharing that. I was just genuinely curious about that, but thanks for sharing. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. I really appreciate that. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm an immigration attorney for over 20 years. I represent families for legal permanent residents, spouses, children, parents. I've filed over 400 DACA applications for different individuals since 2012. I also work with special immigrant juvenile status, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Naturalization, I'm so happy to have naturalized a lot of folks who voted for the first time in this election. So that was really exciting for our office to be a part of that. We also represent folks in asylum, which is really, kind of going away under President Trump. We'll see if President Biden reenacts protections for people who are fleeing persecution in their country. Family petitions of various types, and we do a lot of victims visas, which I'll talk about as well. They get the least amount of attention on TV and on radio, and many people end up being eligible for these types of visas who are documented, right? So they have DACA, or undocumented, where they are here without status. I also have about 150 cases in front of the immigration judge. So I do practice deportation defense. And as I mentioned, I was on the school board for 8 years. I used to be a member of the president of the Colorado Statewide Parent Coalition. And I'm a part of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, the local chapter, as well as the Colorado and Denver Bar Associations. And I won't go through the rest there. Let's see here. So in the book, in the preface of this book, there's a kind of a Cliff Notes quick history lesson for about the last 40 years. And it starts with our intervention as the United States in Latin America, particularly in Central America. The book is really centered around dreamers who are here from Mexico and the children who've arrived from Central America. So this is some interesting watch if you're looking for something to do over the pandemic, is to look into the movie about Oscar Romero. He's now a saint. He was the Archbishop of El Salvador, and he was murdered in the 1980s. And there's lots of connection to US government intelligence and training of military of the Salvadoran government who killed him. It's a really good movie. It's a Hollywood movie, so it's really good production. It's not like a documentary or a podcast. And the movie was made in 1980. So of course on Amazon Video, on Prime, there's one version of the movie that is for free if you have Prime. So I really do recommend it. It's just called Romero, the movie. So check it out. And that's a good way to kind of have a visual and a background as to what happened in Central America, or what has been happening in the countries of El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Honduras. And so I recommend that movie. Please check it out. All right, so the border update. There's a humanitarian crisis. If you didn't know, in 2014, for the first time, more than 67,000 children showed up at the border, our southern border with Mexico. The great majority of these children arrived without their parents and were alone, and they were toddlers, they were babies, they were preteens, and lots of teenagers as well. And former President Obama implemented those policies to remove them quickly and quietly. Along with his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, they created a policy where they wanted to send a message to Central America to not send any more children. And so they actually took all of my adult clients off of our docket, off of the court calendar, moved them all to 2019, and made us all bring all of our kids to court and try to focus on the kids because they wanted to deport them as quickly as possible. This is something about the Obama administration that many folks tried to hide and put away, but it's something that we need to understand, that even Democratic elected officials have also at many times worked against immigrants who are coming to the country, particularly children. And they sent many of these children who arrived at the border to camps in Texas, Arizona, California, foster care in Pennsylvania, New York, Michigan. And there were about 2,000 who were unaccounted for by the government. And by 2019, there were 120,000 children who had shown up at the border. Just last month in November, there were more than 4,600 children who showed up without their parents at the border in November alone. This is pretty incredible. There was just a Washington Post article. And on top of those children, the 4,600 who showed up on their own, there was more than 4,500 families who showed up at the border just in November alone. So President Biden will really be tested to see if he really means what he says about having a more welcoming and caring government with regards to immigration, to ICE, and the Department of Homeland Security. As you know, President Trump intentionally began to separate families. And as of last month, there were 666, what a crazy number, children who still could not be reunited with their families. There was a court order. It's called Miss L, just the initial L versus ICE. And the judge ordered this nonprofit and the government to work together to locate these parents. The number has gone down. So since I made this presentation this month, they're at 628 children are still cannot find, the government still cannot find their parents, even though they were ordered to reunite them. Last year, 8 children died in custody, in ICE custody. And of course, with COVID and more children coming and more difficult policies by President Trump, more than double that number have died in 2020 alone. And we're not done with the year. I wish we were. I know we all are. We're ready for 2021. But many children who've died in ICE custody. So this is a really serious situation that we need to hold, of course, the current government, but our incoming federal government accountable, and our local officials as well. Even in Westminster, there is a private child foster care facility that is holding some of these children. And that just opened last year in Westminster. So the kids aren't down at the border. Like I said, they're all over the nation in these foster care facilities. All right, so detention conditions at the border. You've all seen the newscasts and seen the pictures. This is just one down, at the southern border. There are just masses of people who are gathered at the border. This was happening under President Obama. This has really become apparent under President Trump. And the reason it's become so much more apparent under President Trump is because he enacted a policy we call it the Stay in Mexico policy. The official name is the Migrant Protection Protocol. And of course, it's named to, as if it were to protect immigrants who are arriving, when it absolutely is not. So you have tens of thousands of people who are from all over the world, most of them from Central America, but you also have African, you have Arab, you have Asian immigrants who are at the border, and President Trump has turned them away even when they've presented themselves for asylum. Something really important to know is if somebody comes to the border and says, I fear going back to my country and I seek protection in the United States, that is a legal request. It's not an illegal entry into the country to request asylum, political asylum at our border. And President Trump has gone against our law passed and enacted by Congress to provide people with an interview and determine if they truly deserve protection through our asylum laws. Using a 1920s health statute, President Trump has just said because of the pandemic, he's able to turn everyone away completely and make them stay in Mexico. And our government is providing a little bit of money to the Mexican government, and the Mexican government they are maintaining these large camps, mostly in baseball stadiums and in old nightclubs all along the border. But of course, the conditions, as you could see, there's just people who have walked 2,000, 3,000 miles, and even Africans who've crossed the Atlantic and come up all the way through South America who are there at the border. And this hasn't gone away. And when President-elect Joe Biden takes office, this situation of human beings at the border will still be there, unfortunately. And we're going to have to make sure that he pays attention to that and that his government changes the situation. All right, these are some clients of mine. This is Susana and Eliezer, and they're featured in the book. The book has a lot of stories about people to put everything into context. It's very heavy with graphs and charts and data, but it also has humane stories of people mixed in. Susana, she came to the United States when she was 16 in the 1990s after the Civil War in Guatemala. She now, as you can see from this picture, recently became a US citizen and voted for the first time in this election. She did win her asylum case in the 90s, but not until she had to cross Mexico on foot with a few other young women. They were jailed in Mexico, and she was subjected, all of them were subjected to rape while they were in Mexico and waiting and trying to get to the United States. So very difficult and dangerous conditions face the migrants as they come all the way to the United States. Susana is one of those people who made it here, made her life. She married, had her US citizen children here, became a citizen. And then one day she gets a call, and her nephew is calling from Texas and says, Tia, I'm here in the United States. And she had no idea he was even coming. And this is her nephew, Eliezer, and he was in one of those foster care facilities down in Texas. Well, unlike most of the children who are at the border, they don't know how to get in touch with, and they can't contact their family members. So Eliezer was one of the very lucky few who was able to find a family member, contact her. And then on top of that, Susana didn't wait. The story is that the foster care facility said, we'll put him on a plane. It was December, but we can't get him on a plane to Denver until January. And this is in 2014. And so they said we wouldn't get him on a plane until next year. And she said, well, I need him here for Christmas. I can't leave him in detention. And she said, what are the options? What can we do? And they said, well, if you can come down here and get him. And so she actually, with her husband and her children, they all flew down to Texas, went to the foster care facility, signed all the paperwork they needed as a family member, and they were able to take Eliezer out of that foster care facility, fly back to Denver, enroll him in high school, and he's graduated now from high school. And his story continues. He applied for special immigrant juvenile status. He was in front of the judge here in Denver, and won his case. And he just recently became a legal permanent resident. So he's one of the very few success stories, because he did have this aunt who was able to get him. But many of the children there don't have someone that they can turn to. Eliezer was already 16 when he arrived at the border. Like I mentioned, many of the children who are arriving are toddlers, are 6, 7, 8 years old, 10 years old, and they are just little children, and they don't know how to advocate for themselves. All right, so one of the questions I pose in my book is, who are the dreamers, right? And we talk about the DREAM Act. We need to protect those folks who have DACA, right? The ones who come here as little children, have grown up in the United States, graduated from our schools. And I know all of you in Cosil work so closely with many of the dreamers. Those are the dreamers that we many times think about. And many of them are from Mexico for the most part. And they've come here when they were 10 years old or younger, and they know no other country. They maybe don't even remember Mexico. They may not even speak Spanish. And so this is the dreamers that we hope to see will receive the benefits of the DREAM Act. But what about all the kids who came here since 2012 and 2014 from the Northern Triangle of Central America? That's the NTCA. And the Northern Triangle of Central America, that's El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. And many of those children now, since 2014, we have tens of thousands of these children who've come. And some people say, well, they're not dreamers because they didn't show up a long time ago and they didn't go to school here. But then we have to point out, like Eliezer, even the ones many of them who came in 2014 have already gone through 4 years of high school, have already graduated. Many of them are going to college. And I'm sure many of you in Cosil have seen even those dreamers who are part of the children who have come to the border from those 3 Central American countries. So what I'm trying to do is advocate that we include those children when we talk about who are the dreamers. It's not just kids from Mexico. who came here in the 90s or the early 2000s. It's also the children who've come from Central America, who also came, within the last, 6 years, 7 years. So when we start talking about who would be included in the DREAM Act, we really truly hope that they include those who've been here in the United States all the way up to 2019 or 2020 would be even better. All right, so what do people do when they're here? I'm going to switch the subject a little bit. And there are DACA recipients who, as you know, they had DACA taken away, and then now DACA has been re-implemented, and people can apply for DACA for the first time again since September of 2017. But then we know there's a court case in Texas that's scheduled for December 22nd that might take new DACA applicants out of the mix again. And then we're hoping when Joe Biden comes in and on January 20th, that by February 1st, DACA is reopened for good. But finally, people have realized DACA doesn't really protect anyone, and DACA can be taken away in the future. So what options do DACA recipients have other than just DACA? And I know that many of you who are working with students and colleges, we oftentimes don't have enough information, so we need to share this with each other about how can we get student services and provide options to them. Many of them don't even realize that they have options. So hopefully this presentation will give you a little bit about those options that exist. Okay, so of course, DACA recipients, even if they have DACA and it's never lapsed and they keep renewing, they need to explore all options, right? They may have a previous or a current asylum application, or they might be a derivative under a parent for an asylum application that was filed in the past. So even from Mexico, there are folks who have applied for political asylum. And that's another thing, and that might require more conversations with parents. Children who have arrived here without parents, of course, can file their own asylum applications. Asylum is very difficult right now. There was just an announcement that they're going to take away, for the most part, almost all asylum protections from people who were victims of gang violence, like the Mara Salvatrucha, and people who were victims of domestic violence and try to make gender claims, or people who were extorted by criminals in their country and threatened with death if they didn't pay rent, or if they didn't pay the ransom for kidnapping of family members. President Trump has just yesterday announced that this will be the new policy in 30 days. So it will be enacted 9 days before Joe Biden takes office. So when Joe Biden comes in, he'll have this horrible asylum policy that we hope he'll turn it around quickly. Another option that many people don't know about are U visas and T visas. These are victim visas. So many of the people who, immigrants, as you know, are highly victimized in our society. They commit very few crimes. Immigrants are much less likely, like 50%. They commit about 50% of the crimes that comparatively US citizens commit. US citizens are twice as likely to commit a crime in the United States as an immigrant. So many immigrants are the victims of those crimes. The U visa can protect them and give them legal status if they had been robbed, if they had been threatened at gunpoint, or even worse, any violent crime that had happened to them. And I'll talk a little bit more about U visas. T visas is a trafficking visa. So if they were trafficked by someone, they could become a legal permanent resident. And these are options for people who already have DACA, right? They need to find a way to find a permanent solution because the DREAM Act just hasn't shown up yet. All right, special immigrant juvenile status, as I mentioned, my client Eliezer, who's featured in the book, he filed for what's called special immigrant juvenile status. I'll discuss that just very quickly. And also there are many people who are eligible for family immigration, particularly the DACA students who come from Mexico haven't really explored the ways that they might be able to file through family members. And I find so many DACA recipients who are eligible for family immigration still, and they're surprised. They're like, well, I thought all I could do was DACA, and they didn't really know what questions to ask. Okay, and then people who've had a legal entry in the past have a lot more options and benefits. So this is something I ask people if they came originally as with a tourist visa or with a work visa or some kind of humanitarian visa, and then just stayed in the country. And now they're living undocumented because that legal entry expired. They can use that legal entry to obtain more benefits. So very quickly, special immigrant juvenile status, and Eliezer, who came from Guatemala, from a Mayan family, and Eliezer is trilingual. He speaks Quiche. He also speaks Spanish and English. So he speaks his Mayan tongue as his first language. Anyway, he was under 18 years old. He was abandoned by one or both of his parents. He was abandoned by his father in Guatemala. And then basically he was abandoned by his mother who couldn't take care of him in Guatemala. So he fit this second prong of special immigrant juvenile status. His aunt Susana filed for guardianship over him in the local court in Greeley, there in Weld County. And the judge gave her an order that specified that he was abandoned by one or both parents, that he had suffered mentally or physically as a result, and that it was not in his best interest to return to his home country. And so the judge gave us the order we needed. We filed a petition with immigration. We had to wait 3 years for the visa to become available. And then we filed for permanent residence for him, and he received his green card. And he is now in the pipeline. In 5 years, he can apply to become a US citizen as well. There are so many DACA recipients who are here with one parent or no parents, and they haven't looked at special immigrant juvenile status. The good news is this status, it was just updated last year. The Colorado legislature amended our law so that minors who are under 21, so this changed. If they're still under 21, they can still try to file for special immigrant juvenile status. So if you know any DACA recipients who are coming into college who are 17, 18, even 19 or 20 years old, and they're here with one or none of their parents, they may be eligible for special immigrant juvenile status. Well, most DACA recipients, they've never heard of this. And so they have no idea about how do I apply for this? Where do I apply for this? Who do I talk to? They've just been filling out their form and renewing their DACA. So we have to encourage them to talk to an immigration attorney. And there are over 250 immigration attorneys in my organization in Colorado alone, in the American Immigration Lawyers Association. So there's plenty of people who they could talk to, and we really recommend they do that. I have 30 kids who've gone through this process, and they're at varying stages. Some of them have received their green card. Some of them are waiting for the green card. Some of them are waiting for the approval of their special immigrant juvenile status. So anyway, there's Eliezer again. Remember him? That's how he came in. That's how he became legal. And now he's on the road to citizenship. And he never had to file for DACA. He was too late for DACA because he came in 2014. And as you know, you had to be here in 2007 to file for DACA. All right, so U visas, I mentioned those victims visas. This is something else where people don't realize that they are eligible or could be eligible to become legal permanent residents without applying for DACA, without having to leave the country, because they or their family members have been victims of a crime. And the U visas is a tool of law enforcement that the police and the DAs use to help people convict those who are accused of crimes. So it's been around since the Bush administration. About 2001, 2002, it was really enacted, and it's really helpful for people who are applying, because as we know, reports vary that between 60 to 80% of immigrants report that they or their family members were victims of one or more violent crimes. So that means there are 60 to 80% of all immigrants out there could be eligible for the U visa. This is pretty incredible that there's this opportunity for many people to apply for legal status, and many people just don't even know that they have this opportunity. The benefits of the U visas, there are many. Number one, you get a 4-year work visa. Remember, DACA is only good for 2, and Trump tried to make it only a 1-year extension. It's back to 2 years under the court order that came into effect on Monday. But again, on December 22nd in Texas, they might take it back down to the 1 year. They just keep DACA recipients in limbo. But the U visas are a 4-year work visa. After 3 years, you can automatically apply for permanent residence. All you need to do is keep your nose clean, not get in any trouble for 3 years, live your life, and then apply for permanent residency. You don't have to leave the country. Some cases, even for family immigration, where I'm filing for a spouse or a child of a US citizen, sometimes people have to leave the country and then come back in. Well, in this case, you don't even need to leave. So it's really nice, the U visa. And it also pardons minor crimes and immigration violations. So maybe someone got caught at the border before, maybe they had a shoplifting charge, something that happened to them. The U visa, and it also pardons your entering the country without permission. So it basically gives you a pardon as long as you've been generally a good person and haven't committed any violent crimes yourself. You can become eligible for the U visa. Who receives the U visa? This is really helpful because often the entire family can receive the U visa: spouses, minor children, parents, brothers and sisters. So the entire family can actually use the U visa, even if it was just mom or just dad or even just son who was the victim of the violent crime. You can often get the entire family legalized through the U visas. Now, it's only for victims of certain crimes, okay? It has to be either a violent crime, which is anything where a gun is used, or anything where death is threatened or insinuated. People who are carjacked or are robbed their cash register while they're working cash register at a retail store, or they've just been threatened in, near their home to, give them maybe their necklace or their chain or their watch or anything. Those are violent crimes. Also, anyone who's been a victim of domestic violence, including non-physical offenses. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of domestic violence that are non-physical, right? You might have telephone harassment where someone's calling their current or former spouse or partner, and they're just harassing them repeatedly, but they've never touched them, never hurt them, never hit them physically. So telephone harassment is a non-physical offense that is included in domestic violence that can actually make somebody eligible for the U visa. And knowing this, people are like, really? Wow, I had a domestic disturbance with, my ex. We were in the street and he was yelling at me, and the neighbors called the police. They came and gave him a ticket, and it's just disturbing the peace. He was yelling at me, but he didn't hit me, he didn't touch me. And I'm like, well, that is something that would qualify you for a U visa. It's really incredible how many people qualify for the U visa. Okay, also there are other offenses. And now my presentation has frozen. What's going on here? Here we go. So victims of tampering with the judicial system. If someone is for instance, if someone is a witness in a court case and the accused, their family, calls or says, you shouldn't present yourself as a witness, or something might happen to you, or threatens a witness in any way, they're tampering with the judicial system. And so the U visa, again, would be provided to that person, even if they weren't a victim of a violent crime. Just the fact that they were threatened or kept from cooperating with an investigation is enough to get the U visa. And even some people who are victims of workplace discrimination, if the workplace discrimination rises to the level of a violent crime or rises to the level of domestic violence in a work situation, we can also get people the U visa through that as well. Of course, the U visa, in order to get it, you have to cooperate with the police, the city attorney, a district attorney, a judge, the labor department, the EEOC, or even social services. Any one of these law enforcement agencies can sign a certificate that you cooperated with them, that you were a victim, and that certificate that they signed for immigration then allows you to apply to immigration. Now, if someone's been a victim and they never reported it, that's a problem. And so we need to encourage immigrants who are victims of a crime to go ahead and report those crimes and cooperate. And many immigrants are fearful that they'll be turned over to immigration. Well, this is why the U visa was created, to encourage them and to give them protection. And it's really good protection. If you could get your whole family legalized and then become a resident and eventually a citizen without leaving, it's really worth it. And people need to report those crimes for their own safety, number one, but number two, for their future immigration benefits as well, for them and their families. All right, so we ask people who are DACA recipients to apply for all benefits and all visas that are available for them. Don't wait for a detention or emergency situation. They should be proactive and visit those one of those 250 attorneys who are in the state. I have colleagues who are in Fort Collins, who are in Greeley, who are in Longmont, who are in Colorado Springs and Pueblo. So there is somebody nearby, no matter where you're from. We need to encourage people to not get any advice from TV and radio, especially the radio is really bad. There's a lot of false information and people kind of fishing for clients out there and people who aren't necessarily on the up and up in terms of giving people clear and concise information. Of course, every case is different. So if you hear something on the radio that might sound like, oh, that's how my case would work. No, every case is different. Everyone should talk to someone individually and give them all the details of their case and their family. And then don't wait to begin the process. If you know you can apply for something, you should. Many people who apply through family don't realize that they can apply, or that don't apply through family, they don't realize that they could ask for benefits through stepchildren. So someone who has a stepchild who's a US citizen can have that stepchild file for the parent. Or a child who has a step-parent who's a US citizen can file through that step-parent. And many people come to my office and they're like, how come no one ever told me this? You know, I have, my stepdad's a US citizen and my mom's undocumented. I've been filing for DACA and no one ever told me I could apply through my stepdad. And so we encourage a lot of people to look into their case, and they'll find that they're eligible for many things, and they don't have to just rely on DACA alone. All right, so, all right, that's the end of that slideshow. I'm gonna stop sharing there. And I would like to hear your questions, and I have a song for you when we're ready. But let's answer your questions because I gave a lot of information. So I would love to hear what you think.
Well, I can start if that's okay.
Wonderful.
Can you all hear me? Yes.
Nice to meet you. I can hear you.
Yes. So yeah, Joel Orozco. I work at the Cesar Chavez Cultural Center over at the University of Northern Colorado, just to provide some framework. But yeah, first, thanks for the information. I really appreciated you kind of problematizing the concept of dreamer and how it always often excludes like students from temporarily protected status or U visas and all that. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm excited to be able to share these at the COSIAL listserv. So I have a few questions. The first one is, one of the things that as I work with students, it's this whole notion that you mentioned about like the legal services and sometimes using the notarios and all of those. So if you're able to share that contact list of like, here's some maybe like BIA certified things, what it is, or like border protective, I forget what that is, that are like actually certified. Like I would love that because that's always one of my worries as I am like trying to refer people to places. So I don't know if there's a way that either you can email Danielle or maybe like share that through the chat box or something, but I'm really interested in that list. The other piece is it's this piece around I'm always looking like, well, how we can get like financial aid for students. Because if they don't, we've been getting a lot of students who don't have DACA because, like DACA, because it stopped. So a lot of our students that came in, they were either undocumented. But you talked about this, like, I'm wondering if there's a way, or we have seen a possibilities for like unaccompanied youth, because we've been getting now students who are, I guess, who are now have that designation, that we can maybe tap into, like if they went through some sort of foster system, or if there were in some of those pieces, can we like tap into like monies from like fostering? Because I know like sometimes the students who go through foster, they can have benefits to like go to college and things. So I'm always thinking of like, how do we like not work the system, but like how can we like maximize? Because yeah, oftentimes students didn't know, like you mentioned, like, I don't know, I could apply through my stepdad. It's like, well, maybe you can apply for fostering benefits and get you some tuition monies or something. So I'm just wondering if you heard of anything, or if there's a possibility for like someone who has the unaccompanied minor status could potentially tap into. What are some other ways that they could potentially tap into funding for college, really? So I don't know if you have any tips or information, or if you see like, yes, I had a student or a person who was able to do that. So I don't know if it was much of a question, more of I guess I'm just curious to hear.
Yeah, and I understand, even if someone is eligible for special immigrant juvenile status because they're under 21 and they're here with one or no parents, it's going to take a while. It's going to take them, probably 3 years before they can receive that status and then apply for legal permanent residency. And what if they're trying to go to school in the meantime?
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not an expert on separate funds for those folks. I'm really, my expertise is very limited. I just know how to get them legal.
Right. Yep. Okay.
And it's a very complicated process, but it's something that they need to start now. And the earlier the better. If they're still in high school or in middle school or even younger, they should start right away. That way, by the time they're in the pipeline to apply for student aid, they're already a resident. And of course, then they could do FAFSA and be eligible for so many more scholarships and sources of funding. But some stopgap funding for folks who are special immigrant juveniles, they can't apply for FAFSA. There are not very many specialized scholarships or grants for these folks. Yeah, I could imagine that there might be some funding for people who have gone through foster care facilities, and maybe those are just going to be private scholarships and grants. But I honestly don't know which those are. Yeah, I don't. But I do know that many of the students that you all work with are eligible for special immigrant juvenile status and have no idea. Right. And they might not be able to get DACA, so they better get on this one. Right? Or maybe they were a victim, or somebody in their family was a victim, and the entire family should get on the U visa so that they can then become legal and access those funds, and it would be so much easier for them. So sorry, I don't have a direct answer.
No, yeah, I was wondering, maybe there was an instant, but that's just something that I've been thinking about as you were like talking. I was like, ooh, I wonder if maybe they could potentially even qualify for, or if they went through the detention center, or I'm not sure what's the right terminology for where they're being detained. I was like, is that maybe considered technically as, not necessarily like fostering, but if they were like an award of the state, then I feel like there might be something there that we can like, we're like, well, they qualify then for the services. And yeah, so just my mind goes to, I'm all about like, how do we work the system? Because that's just part of the work that I have to do. So yeah.
Oh, that's good. We're both working the system from different angles here. And
yeah,
absolutely. I mean, if I hear of some funding that's coming from the Department of Health and Human Services or through foster facility, foster recipients, I will contact you and let your organization know. Yeah, I haven't heard of anything yet, but I'll keep my ears open for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have maybe like another quick question, and I don't know if Danielle maybe have a question. I want to make some space too, or someone else. But
Thank you.
not to put you on the spot, but I would have questions. Like I take all this space.
Oh, just like a general question, maybe like in my line of work, because I work with students as a grant coordinator and student counselor. So I'm curious if I do come across any students who do need help with like legal services, is there like, do you have any like contact info that we could send them to maybe connect with you or anyone you work with?
Sure, I'll put that in the chat. So the Immigration Law Office of Arturo Jimenez, we're at info@jimenezimmigrationlaw.com. And our telephone number is 303-455-1809. And I'll put that in the chat real quick here. And of course, you know, we take on individual clients. I'm also happy to do this presentation or other types of presentations to churches, to schools. I've also done trainings for universities. I most recently did a staff training for Red Rocks Community College. And I've in the past done a staff training for Adams State University in Alamosa, and at the National School Board conference in Boston in 2016. So I have different presentations that I'm able to give, and that way hopefully empower many of you who are out there working with the students directly to then, you know, send them the right way so that they can find the services they need.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it just breaks my heart that so many DACA recipients are eligible for so much more and they've just never applied and never thought about it. And many of them who've already turned 21 or 22 or 23 are like, well, I've been here and nobody told me about special immigrant juvenile status. And what, now I can't apply now that I'm over, you know, now that I'm 21 or over, and it's heartbreaking, you know, in many ways. I also put in the chat, if someone goes to an immigration attorney, they should make sure that they're a member of AILA, which is the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And AILA that's a way to tell that an attorney is keeping up with what's going on, that they've made themselves accountable to their colleagues. And as Joel said, not to go to people who are unauthorized, especially the notarios. As you know, in Latin America, a notario is an attorney who is like a judge who can do divorces and adoptions, and they're a super attorney and they're authorized by the federal government. So they're really high level attorneys. In the United States, a notary is just a witness to a signature, right? And you're just a witness. And so people confuse that. And then people take advantage of our community by saying, soy un notario, I'm a notary. And people think, oh, wow, you must be one of those super attorneys who is authorized by the federal government. And they think it's just like their home country in El Salvador or Colombia or wherever they might be from, Mexico. And then they go to that person and that person charges them a ton of money, doesn't do anything or does it wrong, and then they end up in deportation. 50% of my clients, and I have 150 cases in front of the immigration judge, 50% of those folks started out with a notario, somebody who messed up their case, got them put into deportation when they never should have been there, and usually took their money, and then they had to hire an attorney on top of that. So it is a really important message to tell people to go to an actual attorney and a member of AILA, so that they get you know, qualified and expert advice, and that they're taken care of. So it is really important. So yeah, I'm just one of many. I can't serve everyone. I can do more presentations, and then in my office, one by one, serve my clients. But I have plenty of colleagues out there. And there's a couple offices in Greeley, and I'm happy to hear that you're in Greeley. I used to live just down the block towards 8th when you're going out Highway 85, right there by the university. So I was, you know, used to go up to where the Cesar Chavez Cultural Center is and ride my bike up there when I was a little kid. And I would spend all summers in Fort Collins with my uncle who was doing his master's program at CSU. So I have colleagues in Fort Collins. Well, there's only one right now that I know of Kimberly Medina, Kimberly Baker Medina. So yeah, I think Fort Collins, and she has a hard time. It's hard for her to serve everyone who walks into her office. And I still get a lot of folks driving from Greeley and driving from Fort Collins, even from Pueblo and from the Eastern Plains to my office all the way here in Denver. But there's quite a few of us out there. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah. I do have to like jump here on another call here shortly, but this is just more something in the back of my mind, especially with COVID and everything happening, and knowing that, especially like youth still being in detention centers. I'm just wondering if you have heard anything around like, or I guess I just like rumors are like, yeah, they're gonna be like they're gonna let them go, but I'm just like, well, where are they going? Is that really happening? So I'm just wondering if you have heard anything around that, and just like, is that like, as far as like, are detention centers like letting some of these folks leave because of COVID, or are they just being sent to Mexico even if they're not from Mexico? Like, I don't know. I'm just curious if you have heard anything about that. Just
Yeah, there's very few people who are being released from detention during COVID. There are a couple cases, but they're just one-offs. So for the most part, people are being kept in very bad conditions in the detention center. And then when they're deported, or a large number of people are deported at once, they're all infected, and they're just sending them to their countries. It's really bad. It's as bad as we've ever seen. And even before COVID, a pregnant mom or a person with a pre-existing condition was already in danger health-wise going into an immigration detention center, because they're private prisons. And so the profit margin is the less services that they provide, the less doctors and nurses, the more money that corporation makes. So there was never an incentive to give them adequate services and healthcare. And people are locked many times for 23 out of the 24 hours in just a little room with more than 10 people, and they're often sleeping on floors, and there's not enough bed space. It's criminal. It's criminal. If there were state prisons or jails or even city jails with those conditions, they would be sued, and they would be forced to comply and watch out for people's health. But the federal government and these private immigration detention centers do not have that type of transparency or accountability. So it's really bad right now. I feel so bad for the people in detention. So hopefully with President Biden, things will get better, but he's going to have a hard time, even if he wants to change things and make it better. It'll be very difficult for him to unwind this big web of for-profit foster care providers, for-profit detention centers, and yeah, he's not going to be able to do anything overnight. It's going to take a while, even if it does happen. So yeah, pray for those folks, because they're not in a good place right now. Mm-hmm. So I have a little song for you if you have time.
Yeah, why not? Like that. I have to jump into like at 12:15, so I'm gonna have to like jump after that. But I do want to just say thank you for the information. I really found that helpful, and I can think of at least a couple of students I'm working with that when you mentioned about like the juvenile visa piece, I can think of at least 2 students that I'm working with right now. So I'm gonna have to like probably I got a screenshot of your email, so I'll be connecting with you. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you so much. So I'll just end with this song. It's a 3-minute song, and then I'm gonna turn off this video and go to my phone.
I think it's muted.
All right, I've unmuted now.
Okay, we're good.
All right, so this is a preview. This song will be recorded very soon. This song is inspired by the children at the border, many who I visited, and when they came into the US side, they were kept in cages and places we called la hielera, the ice boxes, and they slept on concrete floors with just those foil blankets. So this is called Heartbeat Baby. And here we go. Little boy told the God, today is my birthday. I'm 10 years old. I see streets of gold on your telephone. Your children look so happy. Have you heard my mom sing las mañanitas? Mommy, the baby said, this cell can't hold us. You deserve more than dirt in your hair and concrete floors. The world knows that evil shows, and God knows the heartbeat baby, baby. He told the God, I'm locked in a cage. You've sold your soul, it's a devil's sage. My little head wears a barbed wire crown. You say you're just following orders, but I can see that smile when you frown. Heartbeat, baby, why you wanna cage me? My baby, the mama said, one day you'll save me, take me out of this place. We'll see the light again, we'll know God again. Please, my heartbeat baby, help us, save me. The preacher said, listen to the heartbeat, baby. One day a child's gonna save me, take away our sin. Please pray for the heartbeat babies, babies. He told the church, I'm locked in a cage. You've cast your vote, it's the devil's sage. My little heartbeat, it's slowing down. Won't you please open this cage so I can see your love turn around? Heartbeat, baby, please don't cage me. All right, thank you very much for having me, and thank you to Danielle for staying for my song.
Actually, I was able to stay too. But yes,
Oh,
thank you
Joel's
so
still
much.
there.
Yeah, I thank you so much, Danielle, for putting this together. And Arturo, yes, I would definitely be connecting with you via email. But yes, thanks again, y'all. I gotta go, but this was really helpful. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Feliz Navidad, prospero año.
Okay, bye. Igualmente.
I will go ahead and stop the recording at this time.